If you haven't gotten your copy of Bare Naked Bravery, How to Be Creatively Courageous, then head on over to Amazon right now. It could be on its way to your house or into your device before I'm done introing this next episode. Sara Avant Stover is with us today. This month in the School of Bravery and on the podcast, we're focusing on the bravery ingredient of context, specifically as it pertains to being vulnerable. So when I gave Sara a couple topics to choose from before we started recording the interview, she actually picked this topic specifically. So get ready for some powerful and introspective looks at how context plays a role in our bravery and our ability to be honest and vulnerable with others and within ourselves. Sara Avant Stover is a teacher of feminine spirituality and empowerment. She's a best-selling author, and she's the founder of The Way of the Happy Woman. She mentions this briefly in our conversation today, but after a cancer scare in her early 20s, Sara moved to Thailand, super brave, and embarked on a decade-long healing and spiritual odyssey throughout Asia. She has gone on to uplift tens of thousands of women worldwide, and Sara has been featured in Yoga Journal, the Huffington Post, Newsweek, Natural Health, ABC, NBC, CBS, and I'm really excited to have her here with us today. I know that you'll appreciate her calm and grounded presence throughout the whole conversation, which is completely appropriate. Context, yes, because that's what we later land on is the importance of silence and listening in the midst of seasons of bravery. I am so pleased to present to you Sara Avant Stover. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. As a singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and creative entrepreneur, I encounter some really fascinating stories. I'm on a mission to reveal the depth and width of bravery and its benefits to creatives like yourself. More than ever today, our world needs bravery, unique bravery, from everyone. This is the place where you find it. There is no script or censorship today because that's how these facets of Bare Naked Bravery are in real life. So if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. One of the easiest ways you can share bravery with the world is to send this episode to a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle is Emily Ann Pete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Again, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together. Hey, are you ready for some Bare Naked Bravery?
I am.
Let's do it. I'm excited about this, Sara. I love how calm you feel. I appreciate that today. So thank you. This month we're talking about how context plays a role in our vulnerability. Vulnerability is one of the three main ingredients of bravery, the three main ingredients being vulnerability, imagination, and improvisation. And last month we were talking about timing and improvisation, and this month we're talking about vulnerability and context. So talk to me a little bit about why you were drawn to this subject.
I feel that when I am vulnerable, it requires context. I'm very introverted. And for me to speak out about something, for me to open up to someone else, especially in my line of work, to strangers, whether that's in my books or in a public talk, or if I'm leading a retreat and teaching about something, I don't just want to be vulnerable for the sake of being vulnerable. I want it to be rooted in a really intentional context of why am I sharing this, and to use that sharing, to use that vulnerability in service of opening something up in someone else or teaching a larger theme. And yeah, it has to have that foundation, that power behind it in order for me to feel inspired to do it. Otherwise, I'd rather just there's a kind of vulnerability that I have with my girlfriends, which is about just the deeper, innermost workings of my life. But on a public level, it needs to fit into a broader context.
How have you utilized context in your, I'm just going to take a stab in the dark. How have you utilized context in your creative life?
The phrasing of that isn't really landing with me. Is there like a more of a concrete?
Yeah, like how, when you're creating something, how do you utilize context to create that thing?
Well, the creation arises out of context. It arises out of like an idea, usually an experience that I've had, and lessons that I've learned from that, and teachings that I then want to share as a result of that. So for me, like, there is no creation without the context.
That's good.
Yeah.
I think that probably leads you to having your creations being more well received, just in general, probably. I'm just guessing.
I don't know, but it just feels like my life path is about living my life and then sharing that with other people.
Can you give me a little background behind what drew you to this kind of life?
Yeah, it started in my early 20s. I was 21, and I was a senior in college at an Ivy League college in New York City. And I was very driven. I was very perfectionistic, and I kind of grew up in a home and in a town that was all about appearances and achievements and all the externals. And by the time I was graduating from college, I was just kind of falling apart at the seams on the inside. And during a routine exam at the gynecologist, I found out that I had cervical dysplasia, which is common for young women. Mine was stage 4, just bordering on cervical cancer. And it's kind of a long story, but right after that, I randomly got a job offer to go teach in Thailand. And that was a complete shift from what I...
Teach what?
To teach literature, writing, and dance at an American-style international boarding school in northern Thailand.
That sounds like such an adventure.
It was. And so I had 48 hours to decide if I wanted to take the job.
Were you looking for a job like that?
No.
It just plopped in your lap.
Yeah. And so I decided to go, and I thought I would just stay a year and then go on to grad school and get my PhD, but I ended up staying for 9 years. And that really, while I was there, I started to learn the healing tools that I needed to just kind of rewire myself, to heal my creative organs as a woman, to heal my relationship to myself as a woman, and to really discover what I care about, the kind of rhythm that I want to live at, and who I want to be. And that was the birth of my present career.
And you work mainly with women?
Only with women. Yeah. In the beginning, my 20s, it was co-ed, and the past 10 years, in my 30s, it was all women.
What kind of vulnerability have you witnessed in the work that you've done, like in the retreats that you give or the one-on-one stuff that you work with?
It's all based on vulnerability. I actually, just before I joined you here, I was with one of my leadership mentoring clients, and she's going through a really challenging time. And I just asked her, I teach this an online program called the She School. And I said, well, what about sharing it in the She School? And she said, well, I'm afraid of being judged and ridiculed. And I said, that's not what this space is about. This space is about being vulnerable and being received. And yeah, that's really the foundation, whether it's an online course or an in-person retreat, is a space where women can be themselves. Like the motto for the Way of the Happy Woman is a space for women to come home to themselves. So that's of utmost importance for me, and for me to keep modeling that myself, showing up as I am, and letting women know that it's okay that they show up as themselves too.
Yeah, the 3 sub-ingredients of vulnerability are context, which is today's topic, and then also honesty. And, oh my gosh, and the third one's totally escaped. Oh, risk and rejection. Yeah. So you're always, when you're being vulnerable, you're risking something, usually.
Yeah.
The majority of that risk is often just rejection. You're just risking being that sense of belonging or being called out or whatever. And then when I have just seen in my career as a musician and a songwriter that when I set foot on a stage, I am risking rejection from the audience.
Yeah.
But if I didn't risk that rejection, the vulnerability that I display on stage would never have a chance to sink in. And so it requires like my utilization of context to pick the right songs, to play them at the right tempo, to say the right words, to introduce the songs so that my audience can experience the most of me that I am presenting them. Right. And I think in our work as women in the world, that is our superpower. Like our vulnerability is our superpower.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine how cool that is to get to witness and pull out of people on a day-to-day basis. So
yeah, it's really cool. When I teach in-person retreats, I'm going to teach one this week, and we have an opening circle on the first night, and kind of how closed up everyone is. And then by the end, by the closing circle, to see the transformation, just this openness, this warmth, this connectedness, because gradually these women just felt safe to let themselves go and to let themselves be seen.
Mm-hmm. How have you utilized context to act on that intention of like opening your attendees up?
We have agreements. And we go over those agreements on the first night so that everyone knows the rules that we're playing by, and we all get on the same page with that. So we have a really safe and sacred container to open into.
Yeah. And those boundaries are crucial for the person being vulnerable and the person who's witnessing the vulnerability.
Yeah.
It can feel like if you're being vulnerable and you don't know what's going to happen after you're vulnerable, or if, what if, fill in the blank, that can be enough to make you not take that risk or to not take that rejection.
Yeah.
What kind of agreement is it? Or like what kind of boundaries do you usually set in place for that?
There's like 13 of them. I don't remember them all offhand, but one is be open, honest, and vulnerable. One is we begin and end on time. So everyone's really clear about time boundaries. No giving advice. No back talking. If you need to clean up something up with someone, that you take time to do that outside the circle. No leaving the retreat early.
Those are good ones.
There's some examples.
When I'm doing song shares in different song circles with, fellow songwriters, we have a couple boundaries that like one is no disclaimers. So you can't like start your song share and go, okay, well, I'm not finished yet, but this is not perfect. And I really want to work this last phrase or this last verse is really not that great. So don't judge me for that. Like those are disclaimers. So there's no disclaimers. You have to just get up and play the song.
I like that. As women, we often give disclaimers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be it can actually be more vulnerable, I think, to have no disclaimers.
Yeah.
Than to basically pad yourself with disclaimers.
Right.
But as, if you're just in the songwriting circle, say for instance, you're there as a songwriter to share your mostly finished song so that you can get some unbiased feedback from other songwriters to give you some like tips on your craft, like just your craft specifically.
Right.
So this is not the like, oh, I loved it. It was such a great song. Like, you're my favorite songwriter. You're also my granddaughter, but you're my favorite songwriter.
Right.
So you're getting like really nice, crystal clear feedback. Like, oh, that one word took me out of the experience that you were building.
Yeah.
So having no disclaimer actually really helps in that regard, because the listener is then also getting a fresh approach to your song as well. And I think as women, it can be really hard to not have disclaimers, because there's so many disclaimers about us all over the place.
Yeah.
Do you have, like, what have you seen as being part of that context?
One thing that really struck me recently was one of my colleagues is a pelvic floor physical therapist. And so working with women after childbirth, if they have tears that have caused incontinence and different things. And she said oftentimes when women come to her, they'll apologize, like, oh, I'm so sorry, I haven't shaved in a while, or I haven't gotten waxed. And it's like, it's okay. You're coming to me for healing. You don't need to worry about whether or not you got waxed recently. And I think that, in so many contexts where we're making these disclaimers about ourselves, I think because also society has really high expectations for us, and we have really high expectations for ourselves. So we feel like we need to make those excuses before putting ourselves forward. Like we're automatically anticipating our inadequacy rather than our enoughness.
Why do you think we do that?
Because we're constantly, like, it's in the milieu that we are not enough, that we have to, buy this cream or do this course or weigh this amount or wear this name brand in order to be enough.
The context of our culture really plays a part in how we are able to present ourselves to the rest of the world, in good ways and bad ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes back to parenting. I love my parents, and I know they did the best job they could, but I know the dominant paradigm for parenting is about the externals and not about that unconditional, I love you for who you are. It's okay for you to be who you are as you are. And so I think from a very young age, especially as girls and women, we were always trying to pigeonhole ourselves into this certain way of being. And it's insidious, it just keeps, even if we're on a path of living a conscious life, it seeps in.
So as women, what can we do to display our vulnerability in a world that is filled with a masculine context? I know that's a really big...
I don't think there's any one right answer, but I think that's what we're all trying to figure out. And the things that help me are, number one, meditation, like really taking time for myself every day and to connect to my inner voice. Like, what is my truth? And to carve out this, I also do these energy clearing practices to actually carve out my energetic space. So I don't have, or even if I do have all the other people's stuff in my space, that I get it out so I can fill my space with me. So that, and surrounding myself with people who really see me and appreciate me for who I am, and regularly doing an inventory of relationships. Is this a loving relationship to have in my life? And, being willing, having the bravery to end relationships, even friendships or professional relationships, if it doesn't feel right, or, if boundaries are being crossed. So I think those two things, relationship with myself and relationship with others, are really central.
I just know I've had many discussions with women who are in the workplace who are trying to be brave and stand up and speak up and say the things that they know they need to say. And oftentimes that requires an immense amount of vulnerability. And so it's really difficult at times to be in the midst of a hustle bustle environment and take that time to meditate or really sink into your intuition and ask your, inner guidance or inner voice, what is the right word to say, or should you say it and when should you say it and all of those things. So
yeah, it's a muscle. It's a muscle to develop, just like going to the gym and getting stronger. And you can't, I can't expect myself to get it right the first time. That's why it is a daily practice. And each day has new challenges. So, I still mess up. And maybe, I had an instance this afternoon. I was walking my dog and one of my neighbors just said something that was kind of insulting to me. And it really caught me off guard. And I just played nice. And instead of saying like, hey, that's not okay for you to say that to me while I'm just out walking my dog. I mean, it was completely just out of left field. And there's little instances like that where, we can catch ourselves like, oh, I wasn't really there for myself in that moment. I wasn't really standing in my strength and standing in my truth. I was just doing, succumbing to the disease to please. But the more that I take that time each day to really connect with myself and get present, the more likely I'll be to catch those moments.
To advocate for yourself, I would like to say.
Yeah.
That in moments like that, sometimes just responding the way you quote unquote normally would respond to a conversation, or my favorite radio talk show host is Dr. Joy Brown. I listen to her whenever I'm on tour. I just listen to her for hours.
Okay.
She just talks and talks about all sorts of things. But one of her things that she says is a smile and act stupid. And sometimes that's the best boundary that you can place for yourself.
Totally.
So to advocate for you, I would say that the way you responded is probably the appropriate response, especially because, you responded that way probably because your body wasn't ready to respond to what it was receiving.
Yeah. And acknowledging I actually don't want to have a conversation with this person. I just want to keep walking. But it's an interesting exercise for me because that is my default. And so as I kept walking, I was just wondering well, what else could I have said?
Yeah.
That would be kind of out of my usual pattern.
And you could still say something.
Yeah.
That's still on the table. And saying something, especially after the fact, is sometimes even more vulnerable than saying it in the moment.
Yeah. But then that goes back to just choosing, who we're gonna be vulnerable with.
Right. And picking the context for that, is really, if you were to speak to this person later, when is the right context? Do you go to their house or do you invite them over to your house? Or do you have the talk in the driveway? Or, what would be the most appropriate context for a conversation like that to say hey, listen, what you said to me hurt my feelings or was not okay or inappropriate or.
Yeah.
And then you also have to keep in mind the context of their ability to receive and hear what you have to say too, because they might not have been able to respond or receive a word I'm sorry, that was really inappropriate. No. So I bet you anything, your intuition just took the reins and was I got this.
Yeah.
I got this.
This is how we're handling it.
We'll get back to the bravery at hand in a second, but I wanted to remind you that I first began having these conversations both on and off the podcast because I was curious about what bravery actually meant. If we could build it, if so, with what ingredients. And I was so curious, I turned my research and personal stories of experiences with feats of bravery into a book. That book is called Bare Naked Bravery: How to Be Creatively Courageous, and it's now available in multiple formats on Amazon right now. So go get yourself a copy of Bare Naked Bravery: How to Be Creatively Courageous, and after you read it, let me know what you think.
I know that when I have looked back over my moments where I thought that I wasn't being brave, I dig a little bit deeper and I see that, oh, no, I really was. My intuition did take over and was defaulting to what I thought, someone else might say is a shrill kind of bitchy version of responding to a situation, but it's actually me setting up these immense brick walls of boundaries and going like, you will not cross these lines.
I think that's a really interesting point, because a lot of times we can think that bravery is really big and like kind of has a lot of bravado, and that bravery can also be like a shrinking.
Mm-hmm.
It can actually be a quieting, a choosing to walk away,
mm-hmm.
turn the other cheek.
And it's, when we can listen, sometimes that's part of the shrinking, is that it's not, we aren't shrinking, but our output is shrinking. And so we are doing more listening than we are speaking or talking. And so, like, if you're in the midst of an argument with somebody and you don't say anything, you might be actually subconsciously listening to your intuition to try to determine, like, do I walk out of the room now? What do I say next? How do I respond to this? Do I call the police? Do I, there's so many ways to respond in a brave way to any kind of engagement or encounter that we may have. And I think as women, it's really refreshing to know that our superpower can be vulnerability, and it doesn't have to be a big, huge feat of bravery. It can simply just be going, oh, interesting.
Right. Yeah, because something that also strikes me is social media, and how it's almost very in fashion to be vulnerable on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've been exploring that feels vulnerable to me is that I'm not really posting on social media for my...
Me too, yeah.
You too. Yeah. And I used to have like a social media schedule, and I just realized a couple months ago, like, I don't need to do this. This season of my life is about really taking care of myself and really listening to myself and how I want to spend my time, and reassessing my quote unquote shoulds. And so it's that quieter vulnerability. I'm not voicing all my vulnerability on social media. I'm just feeling the vulnerability of not doing what everyone else is doing and what I feel like I should be doing to quote unquote grow my business.
Oh my gosh, I so resonate with this. So I have been it's been I think about a year now where I have been slowly trickling down the look at this meal I just ate. As opposed, here are the tears I just cried, kinds of moments. And saving those for me and my life and my family and my friends and my community. And then the rest of the world gets the public parts, here's the latest episode. I just finished a new song, the things that are for the world.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that I can't be vulnerable within those posts,
totally
displaying that ability or the vulnerability, the ability of being vulnerable. But it is so refreshing. And it took me a while. I don't know about you, but it took me a while to kind of wean myself off of that impulse to just be overly vulnerable online. Or was that an easy step for you?
I don't know. I think, I've never been a really big poster on social media. But I think the line that I'm in right now is my work has been so much about sharing my vulnerability and just sharing a lot from my personal life after I've taken a lot of space. But I'm in a shift where I don't want to do that anymore, where I want to not share so much of my life and just extract the wisdom from it, to shift the context.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And to have more of a boundary around my personal life.
What kind of boundaries have you put up around that? I mean, I know there's a loose generic one.
I'm not sure. I'm still in the process. I'm still in kind of the redefining process.
It's so interesting because as business owners, you have to make a choice. Let's just use social media as an example. there's a standard and there's an expectation, and that standard and expectation plays a role in the context of your vulnerability. So like the standard of social media would be like, 5 Instagram stories a day and 1 Instagram post a day, like just for example. That flexes depending on the industry and depending on the social media platform that you're using, right? But utilizing those standards and expectations to your benefit can actually be a really cool tool when you're trying to lay these boundaries for yourself to go, okay, well, I know the standard is 5. So instead of doing it 5 different times in the day, this is what I've done recently. I'm going to do 1 story so that it has 5 little segments.
Okay. See, I don't even do Insta stories. I have a strong boundary around that.
Well, but it just allows me to go into Instagram once a day.
Yeah.
I do the post and then I do a quick, several little videos and then be done with it.
That's it. Yeah. It's like one of your, just part of your work day.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has a structure.
Yeah. But I mean, I have other friends who are on Insta stories and they're doing, they're just snapping the whole living daylight out of, life. They're just all about it. And I find that a little overwhelming. Like I can't watch all of their stories because I don't have time to sit down and experience someone else's life from sun up to sundown. But because I just did that for my own life. So yeah, but there are ways to utilize the expectation and the context and still be vulnerable and show up despite your boundaries or despite some of the lines that you have set in place for yourself. So
yeah,
I always find those puzzles to be really exciting to go I have a limitation. I can only log into Instagram once a day. And yet the world is telling me that I need to do X, Y, Z. Do I choose to do that? Or do I choose to meet those expectations in a unique, creative way?
Yeah, I'm in the process of just redefining that for myself. And I think that I really look to Buddhist teachers and leaders around that and just spiritual leaders, because I really value that concept of deep work, of really taking time to contemplate the deeper issues and to go to the deeper aspects of myself. And while social media can be fun, it distracts me from doing that. And so I'm just really in this dance between how can I just share from the depths in a way that doesn't distract from that.
What have you discovered?
Well, right now it's that we just post something if there's a podcast or an article or, hey, this retreat is happening. So just those little announcements. And we'll probably go back to sharing, on a semi-regular basis, just quotes or, inspirational thoughts that come from, the depths.
So let's shift gears because I would love to pick your brain about this. What about the context of deep work?
What needs to be in place for that?
Yeah, I mean, I love it because I have the majority of my calendar is basically reserved I'm on the Eastern time zone right now. So basically no one can schedule anything in my calendar before noon.
Uh-huh.
That's the rule right now. Whenever I'm on tour, that just kind of flies out the window just because I'm crossing time zones and it's not worth it.
Right.
But when I'm in one place or I'm in one time zone, I typically try to reserve everything before noon is my time to get shit done.
Yeah.
So I love deep work, but one of the challenges that I have had recently is I also have deep busy work.
Administrative type stuff?
Administrative, but it's also important things that I want to do, but there are things like the bigger projects that take, it's not worth me diving into that project unless I have 3 hours.
Right.
And so I'm just curious what your deep work practice looks like and how you lay in place some of those boundaries for yourself. Because everybody's going to be different, right? But
yeah.
It's just a different kind of vulnerability.
Yeah, this year I'm taking a really radical approach to deep work. So I was on a meditation retreat in December, and I was just asking myself, how can I make this year easier? How can I wanted to have a lot more time to myself, a lot more time just to be and to really put myself first. And I came up with this concept or this idea, like, what if I just was kind of like, quote unquote, in the office 2 weeks out of each month? And then I looked at, because I used to only schedule meetings on Wednesdays. And then I thought, well, what if I only did that two Wednesdays out of each month? And so when I got home from the retreat, I mapped that out on my calendar. And so now there's only 2 weeks out of each month when I have meetings or I'm teaching classes or have clients. And it's been like revolutionary for me. It's been revolutionary for me. So after today, there's going to be 3.5 weeks where I don't have any meetings. I don't have any clients. I'm not teaching anything. And it's just, it's uncomfortable. And it brings up feelings of guilt, like I'm not working hard enough. I'm not doing enough. But it's really giving me a lot more space to do the things that I really want to do, which is sometimes doing nothing. Mm-hmm. And we also, we run our business on Basecamp, but I used to have a bigger team, and I decided I want to downsize my team because I don't like managing. And so how can I run this operation as simply as possible? And, I used to check in on like customer needs and stuff every week. And I just realized I don't need to do that every week. I could do that only the weeks when I'm quote unquote in the office, and people can just learn, like they'll just need to wait a little bit longer to hear from me and set a new expectation, set a new context.
So how have you laid the ground for those expectations? How did that change and transition go?
If I lay it down in the beginning of the year, then just the online courses that I teach, they're 9 months. And so people need to, I set up my teaching schedule that way, and people who are scheduling mentoring sessions with me schedule ahead of time for those 9 months. And then we just have an autoresponder on the company support email that says, if you need something from Sara, she's on sabbatical this year, and it might take, 2 to 6 weeks to get an answer from her.
Yeah. Have you had any like negative pushback from that?
No.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
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 I was just talking with a colleague the other day about the beauty of a frequently asked autoresponder.
Yeah.
So putting all of your FAQs in your autoresponder so that like if you are away for a week or whatever, you can flip that autoresponder on, and that like 80% of those email questions are going to get answered because you just responded to all of them, every single one of them, to everyone.
Right.
So I think that that's a really good way. I mean, you could even have like an autoresponder, an in the office autoresponder and an out of the office autoresponder that's just always on, just to minimize your.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing, even with my own email accounts, is saying like, it's my email account. I can go 2 weeks, 3 weeks without checking my email, not in tax season, when I have to talk to my accountant, but if there's nothing pressing that needs to happen, just letting people wait and knowing that that's okay for me to do.
Where did you find the permission to do that?
I had to find it within myself. It's been years of really looking at business and lifestyle design. And each year, I think getting even more and more brave about how I do it. And just understanding like the only way that I'm going to have a job that like I really, really love is if I create that. And so what is it going to take for me to do that? And for me to really honor who I am and what I need to show up, even if the world doesn't value that or see that as work. But the times when I'm not, doesn't look like I'm working, that's when I'm really doing my work.
This has been so good. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. I mean, I think that getting still and listening to the context can be a really, really powerful choice if you're in the midst of like a season of bravery. And I'm really looking forward to hearing how we end up applying some of these listen in and then speak up and out. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a really powerful move, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And thanks for setting the context for the conversation. It's really refreshing.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Beyond your free bravery bundle, which is always available at emilyannpeterson.com/join, your brave takeaway from today's show is to take an extra moment before responding to the next thing. Email, phone, call, text, whatever. Breathe deeply and ask yourself how context will play a role in your reaction to that next thing. And I want you to notice that whether mindfulness changed anything for you. If so, we want to hear about it in the Bare Naked Bravery Community Facebook group. As always, we'd love to hear all about your favorite parts of today's Bare Naked Bravery, and you can find Sara Stover and myself on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all the other things. Just go ahead and tag us in any posts that you do or share so that we can cheer you on and see what you're up to. Sarah's links are all in the show notes for this episode, and anything else that we've referred to is in the show notes as well. So be sure to visit us online for all of that. And if you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it for you, then I would ask that you share it with somebody who you think would enjoy it. And if you have an extra 2 minutes to spare, leave us a review in iTunes. It really does help us out a lot. And the reason why we start podcasts like this is because the world needs more bravery, and this can be your small seed of bravery that you can contribute to the world today. So you are definitely a part of this and that and everything else. So if you are digging the music in today's episode, it's because it's brought to you by Lee Rosevere, and you can find out more about all the other artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show by going to emilyannpeterson.com. And I'm looking forward to being with you soon. Short little announcement. We're going to be on a little hiatus for like a month or two, and we're going to relaunch with an exciting new version of the podcast soon. So keep your ears to the ground for this. And thank you so much, Sara Avant Stover, for joining us. Until then, I have one message for you. It's this: be yourself, be vulnerable, be brave, because the world needs more of your bravery.